Hey there, this is Pastor Tabitha Purple. I am back with my Bible series. I'm not feeling particularly well, so I thought what better time to start recording again and doing the Bible series than now, which is kind of hilarious. But what we'd like to do today is look at the Passion Translation. And so we're going to dig in. I have just been gifted these for my birthday and Christmas, so I'm really excited to share those with you and to review them. But first we're going to just go through some facts and information so that you can have an idea about what the Passion Translation is. Now, I had a misconception about the Passion Translation. I actually thought that it wasn't a translation as much as it was a now what's the word? I've lost the word. I thought it was a paraphrase, and then I came to find out that it's actually a translation. So that was my error, and I think that that goes to show you that a lot of times people can have a misconception. Even when they hear something, you can have an idea about something that maybe isn't true. And so I was quite interested to know this. Basically, what's happened is we have been doing an online prayer meeting every week on the We Love to Pray platform. And on that platform, one of the colleagues uses the Passion Translation. And then we have like 3 or 4 different translations of the Bible. And every time I heard the Passion Translation, I was like, oh, the translation just felt so good in my bones kind of thing. It had such a vivacious impact. The language was so beautiful, and particularly because we were reading the Psalms, I was like, wow, this is really good. And then I kept thinking to myself, do I have one of those? And very kindly, somebody who is on the platform gifted me one and said, hey, we all have it, you should have it too. It's very kind of them, as they know I can always get online Bibles, but I just love to sit with an actual Bible when I'm studying. So that's just my way of studying. So let's go through this. The Passion Translation came into being around 2015, 7 to 17. The first iteration was 15, but 17 is the one that is in current circulation. And this one is the 2020 edition. So what's the first thing that we learn about this is that in the short years that it's been around, the Bible has been updated at least 3 times. And that is actually part of the attraction or the idea behind the Bible. Language is dynamic, language is constantly changing, and so understanding of theology, understanding of the people of the time, historical discovery. So instead of having a static this is this year translation fixed in point, they have what is a dynamic translation, which is then moving constantly with what is released. And so each time they do a reprint, it actually isn't just a reprint, it is a brand new kind of relook at it, and they update it. So a couple of things. Online it says it's called a dynamic equivalent English translation, but on their actual information what they talk about is the different equivalencies. And equivalency is when you take a word from one language and you translate it directly to word for word into another language. Can you find an equivalent word? Now, for those of you who are multilingual or bilingual, what you will know is it's actually a really difficult process, even with modern languages. For example, I work in 2 languages, work in Dutch and English, and actually I now work in 4 others. And what I find is that the rhythm of the language, the way that you translate can be very different. But because I speak the 2 languages, I often find that when somebody is translating me, I might not appreciate the way that they've translated it, or it might not get to the essence of what I was saying because they've had to interpret it to work the translation out. And so I might say the same sentence again to give the feeling that I mean that helps the translator to understand where the English is going. And so with that being said, that is true of all languages, and particularly when dealing with languages that are dead languages. They have historical roots. The Semitic languages are not spoken anymore in the way that they were originally spoken. Of course, as with all languages, they grow and change. And so that fixed point language that we have doesn't necessarily have a direct equivalency, but that doesn't stop us from trying. And so there are kind of 3 major ways of doing it. There's formal equivalency, which is where you just take word for word. We've talked about that. There is functional equivalency, which is where you take the thought for thought. And then in this particular case, they're doing essential equivalency is what they call it. The internet likes to call it dynamic equivalency, and basically that's taking meaning for meaning. So instead of just translating the words, so you do a word for word, what you're trying to do is take the meaning of that then sentence, the meaning of that paragraph, the meaning of that passage, and try and adapt the words, the language, so that the meaning is actually conveyed to the person who's reading it. And this is a work of a lifetime, right? This is not an easy task. They base this idea off of Martin Luther, who, when he was trying to do the translation into German for the people, what he was saying is he's trying to express Hebrew ideas in the German language that the everyday person spoke. And it's a really, it's something that's foundational to Christianity across the board. Even within the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, what you have is people trying to explain the original Hebrew ideas into another language. When you have the New Testament, that is trying to explain often Hebrew ideas into New Testament, into Koine Greek. And so you have this constant shifting of language. So I think that was really, it was quite nice to hear how they had arrived at that position of trying to get meaning for meaning. But that does mean that sometimes you hear the difference very much, and it hits you in a different way. And one of the things that they say is one of the reasons it's called the Passion Translation is because they want to have the heart of God's character, his love, at the forefront always of the translation. And so they're trying to always convey who God is in his essence in the translation. Now that can be challenging, and they only have at the moment the New Testament, Psalms, Proverbs, and Song of Solomon's, and I think they've now got Genesis. But when we come to some of our Old Testament texts, it's not that the God of love isn't there, but I think sometimes with a Western lens, we find that really difficult to understand because we're so culturally different that it really strikes us a lot of times as odd. So I'm kind of intrigued how they will handle the Old Testament text. I think the New Testament text lends it, Psalms lends itself, Song of Solomon lends itself to these ideas. So there's some literature that we have in the biblical narrative that will lend itself to the idea of keeping this at your forefront of your mind. And how you do that will be impacted. So I'm intrigued, but I don't have those other new books that they're doing. One of the things to look at is that it is a single author translation. So I tried to figure out this. It says they have what they call a lead or pioneer translators, and that's a couple, Brian and Candice Simmons, and these are married missionaries and authors. They worked in Panama, and through their work of translating the Bible into Panamanian and dealing with people in a bilingual setting and all of the translation issues that they encountered, they realized that when they came back to the USA, again where it's based, it would be useful to have that work done. And so for me, I was like, I kind of was umming and ahhing because single author translations are notoriously very difficult, but they also have, of course, the single-mindedness of what the author is trying to translate, and all translations have interpretation. What I was pleased to say is when I dug a little deeper, the Passion Translation actually has a theological review body, and it has like 7+ PhDs, people who actually review the text and make the edits and give notes back to change and make changes and do those things. So there is a rigorous review and editing process, which I guess in some ways is very much like how the Bible is created anyway. Each book of the Bible would have been in some way created with this the author and editors working together to get the final script, because papyrus and all of those things, cultural, historical reasons why that is. So I think that gave me a little bit more hope and a little bit more comfort in the translation. What I will say is I've primarily used it for the Psalms. I haven't dug as deep as I would like to into it to give you all of the different translations, but I would like you to look at this one. Of course, somebody bought it for me in purple, so I'm very blessed. But we're going to have a look at the Bible, which is always something we do. And we're going to just see what thoughts we have based on that. But I hope that introduction gives you something. Remember, the key factor here is the Bible is meant to be understood. The Bible is meant to be the story of, it's God's love story to humanity. It's what God has written of how he will save us, how he will deliver us. And that love story has been written by 70 plus authors over a long span of history, with as many editors and inspired people working to put that together. And so when you pick up a translation, I think sometimes people come with this really negative idea about a translation or about what translations mean, particularly within countries in which you are monolingual and are not forced to have various languages and interact with various languages. But I do see it across the board in different settings, that people will want to stick with whatever their favorite is that they grew up with, and that's okay. But remember, that doesn't mean that newer translations are bad. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means that you have to understand what purpose they're being created for. And so that you will then hear in the text those purposes coming out. We've talked about Bibles which were created for the sole purpose of bringing back the he, she into the Bible. We've talked about Bibles that have wanted to give a more gender neutral idea and inclusive ideas. And now we're talking about one that wants to really center the love of God in its translation and give the actual meaning, essential meaning of what the text is saying to people. So I think all in all for me, it's particularly reading the Psalms. I don't know about the rest of the books, but particularly reading the Psalms, I really enjoy listening to it. It's such a fabulous translation to listen to because it gives you so much hope and colour. And that really is just a priceless thing, to hear it in a language you understand and how you do. All right, so there you go. That's the intro. We're going to have a look at the Bible. Okay, so this is the Bible that we're looking at. I hope that you can see that. I hope that's clear for you. The Passion Translation Bible. This is the New Testament, Psalms, Proverbs, Song of Solomon. This was the 2020 edition. So it's complete till when it was released. It's compact, so it's small enough to put in your handbag, this particular one. And it's done for comfort. So when you actually have this particular translation, and as I say, it's updated regularly, it feels lovely, and of course it's a beautiful colour. But the most important thing is how they actually deal with the text. And so underneath there are a million notes and things that they've written to help you to keep things, I think, in perspective and to help you understanding. So here's the Psalms, and I want to just read to you Psalms 23. It's a very well-known Psalms, and I really want to read it because I think you'll get a quick understanding of what I mean about the way the translation reads and speaks to you as it's reading. So I'd like to just give you this, and also to note that it uses the biblical name of God, so Yahweh, as a direct reflection of what God actually says. So it says this: Yahweh is my best friend and my shepherd. I always have more than enough. He offers a resting place for me in his luxurious love. His tracks take me to an oasis of peace near the quiet brook of bliss. That's where he restores and revives my life. He opens before me the right path and leads me along in his footsteps of righteousness, so that I can bring honor to his name. Even when your path takes me through the valley of the deepest, darkest fear, will never conquer me, for you already have. Your authority is my strength and my peace. The comfort of your love takes away my fear. I'll never be lonely, for you are near. You become my delicious feast, even when my enemies dare to fight. You anoint me in the fragrance of your Holy Spirit. You give me all I can drink of you until my cup overflows. So why would I fear the future? Only goodness and tender love pursue me all the days of my life, that afterward, when my life is through, I'll return to your glorious presence to be with you forever, forever with you. So you can hear the poetic language. You can hear the intention of taking the meaning. You can very much hear the difference in taking the meaning and translating it into modern. Now, there'll be some people who absolutely hate that because Psalms 23 is sacred. They've memorized it since they were a child. But I think if you give it a chance to have it alongside one of your more traditional translations, you'll find that it adds life and color to what you're doing. That's in my opinion. It's up to you whether you agree. This is the journal that I was given alongside it. So it's, as you know, I journal. So if you've seen any of those pages, and basically what they have is a really simple format where you can write down the Bible reading, your reflection, and the special verse, any revelations you've had, applications and praise, and go on to write a prayer or an application. So depending on what the day is, you get a different idea. So you can write those down, and then it has these wonderful pages, of course, in set in it. So to give you those kind of stop points for you will never be asked to carry more than you can endure. So familiar text in which you can write that down. So this, the combination is great. What I find, as I said, is listening to it alongside my usual translation just adds a depth of meaning and color that's really helpful. So I hope this is helpful to you. I hope that you are encouraged to maybe step out of your comfort zone and look up an online translation of the Passion. Of course, this is not an encouragement to go buy new Bibles. That's just my particular habits. But I'm glad I could share it with you. So God bless you. Until the next time. Bye-bye.